with our friends. Woof woof. And there's Sam, your friend to play with, Biscuit. And it's time to light the menorah. Isn't it a beautiful, sweet puppy? Happy Hanukkah, Biscuit. Happy Hanukkah to all. And they have little presents for each other. And these are chocolate coins. They get chocolate coins. And they play a little game called dreidel. They have these little spinning tops. Yes?
There's like a letter for each thing you do, and you put things out. One says you get half, one says you get a handful, one says you get none, and one says you get all.
Very good. You're right. And you can use coins or chocolate or whatever you want. And I have dreidels up there afterwards if you guys want to play and spin them. Okay. Thank you. Okay. You can go back and... Thank you, guys.
He just liked that story because the dog's friend was named Sam.
It's a great book. Hanukkah for this year began in the evening of Sunday, December 6th, and it ends in the evening of Monday, tomorrow, December 14th. Lighting the Hanukkah Menorah is one of the most important parts of celebrating the Jewish festival of Hanukkah. This ritual has been observed since the destruction of the temple, which happened during the Great Revolt of the Jewish people against Roman oppression, which took place from 66 to 70 CE. It is done in commemoration of the miracle of the Hanukkah lights, lights which were said to burn for 8 nights, when there was only oil enough for one. The Hanukkah Menorah has places for 9 candles, one for the 8 nights of the holiday, plus one for the Samas, the helper candle. The Hanukkah Menorah is usually lit after sunset. When stars appear in the sky, the candles must remain lit for at least a half hour. Today, the lit menorah is usually placed in or near a window, so the passerbyers are able to see the light menorah and be reminded of the Hanukkah miracle. We begin by lighting the servant candle. It is called the Shamas, which means to serve. As one candle may light others and yet lose none of its own light, so may our religious exploration kindle the light of truth for many people in many times and places. This blessing is said on the first night only. Blessed is the eternal our God, ruler of the universe, who has kept us alive and has preserved us and enabled us to reach this season. Barak atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam. Shehechnu yanu ki mananu higi yanu lazman hazi. The following 7 nights, there are 2 blessings that are said each night. The first is, blessed is the eternal our God, ruler of the universe, who hallows us with mitzvot and commands us to kindle the Hanukkah lights. And the second blessing is, blessed is the eternal our God, ruler of the universe, who performed miracles for our ancestors in days of old at this season. And there's a little Unitarian Universalist meeting that has been put to the 8 candles as well. So I'll say those as I light it. The first candle is for the first cause, the ultimate ground of existence, the source of our highest value, that which gives meaning to our lives. The second light is the light of great religious teachers and great scriptures, from many lands and many traditions, which illuminate our paths as we search for truth and meaning in our lives. The third candle is the light of justice. No nation can long endure which is unjust to the weak. Justice, always justice, shalt thou persevere, was the teaching of Moses. The fourth light is the light of mercy. Cruelty hardens our hearts and destroys relationships. Do justice and love mercy was the teaching of Micah the prophet. The fifth light is the light of holiness. When we intentionally live so as to maintain a sense of wonder and respect and act in accordance with these qualities, we can make all of life sacred. The sixth light is the light of love. Love does not consist in gazing at each other, but in looking outward together in the same direction. The seventh light is the calm light of patience. Nothing can be achieved in haste. And the eighth candle is the light of courage. As Moses said to Joshua, be strong and of good courage. Mid-December is a dark time of the year. As the daylight, already brief here in the northern hemisphere, grows exorbitantly shorter as our days inch their way toward the shortest of them all, the winter solace. It is natural in this dark time that our thoughts and our longings turn towards the light. Natural that at this time of year, religious calendars the world over feature festivals and holidays on the theme of returning light and hope. This includes the pagan winter solace, the Christian Christmas, the secular Christmas, and the Jewish festival of Hanukkah. Most of us have learned about holiday customs and even experimented with a few of them both during religious education classes and at home. We may even have been encouraged to pay attention to what these holidays have in common. We were encouraged to universalize their meanings so that we might learn what we have in common with the people who held these holidays sacred. Unfortunately, this made it easy to simply lump Hanukkah in with all the other festivals of light that happen at this time of year. Indeed, it is common for many Unitarian-Universalist congregations to celebrate a UU version of Hanukkah each December along with Christmas. Some families have a small menorah, and children may even light the candles on each of the 8th and 2nd nights. I don't mean to belittle this approach, for it is useful, and indeed, it is much better than teaching our children and ourselves nothing about the holidays and holy days of other religions. And sometimes, seeking universal meanings does help us to learn respect for others' ideas and opinions. Yes, even their inherent worth and dignity, because we feel ourselves to have something in common with them. But especially in today's times, I believe that it's more likely that we will come to respect one another by understanding and appreciating how we are different. I believe we must come to appreciating our own and each other's particularities. A few years ago, I read a column in a Jewish newspaper written by Rabbi Keith Stern that took a head-on approach to the kind of particularities that emerged during the December holiday season for Jewish folks. He wrote, "Most of us who are born into Jewish families are carefully prepped about the rules of December in our first years of life. Long before venturing out into the big world where crosses, mangers, and Christmas trees abound. Like in the old war movies, before being dropped behind the lines, we get instructions about what to say and how to say it, how to handle the tough questions that inevitably get thrown our way. Our explicit orders were to repeat only the equivalent of our name, rank, and serial number. I'm Jewish. Santa Claus doesn't visit our house. We don't sing much like this at our house, and the ever important, no, Hanukkah is not the Jewish Christmas." He continues, "A few years ago in late November, I found myself in line at an area Toys R Us, basket laden with lots of toys and such for all the good little boys and girls in my family. This sprightly checker, replete in red elephant cap and a big I Love Christmas pin, looked at my mound of items and said, 'Merry Christmas!' 'Thank you,' I replied icily, winding up with my name, rank, and serial number. 'But I don't celebrate Christmas. I'm Jewish. My family celebrates Hanukkah. And oh, that's the Jewish Christmas, right?' 'No, no, no. One has nothing to do with the other.' 'Well then,' she asked, 'what's with all the presents?'" Rabbi Stern goes on to wonder if the Toys R Us elf is right, if Hanukkah has indeed become the Jewish Christmas by absorbing too much of the secular Christmas culture most Jewish people find themselves surrounded by focusing overmuch on trimmings and presents and lights and such. After some soul searching, he concludes that as long as the people remember and celebrate the real meaning of the holiday, as long as they tell the story, say the blessings and light the candles, Hanukkah will endure for them as a message of affirmation and faith. What is that message? According to Byrd, professor and author of books on Jewish practice, there are 4 levels to the story of Hanukkah, each addressing the Jews of any given generation with a different sense of urgency and immediacy. At one level, is the story of religious freedom and national sovereignty. The second, Hanukkah, is about Jewish particularism versus assimilation. The third is a tale of the few against the many, the weak against the mighty and powerful. And the fourth is about lights and miracles. These four levels of meaning are all present in the Hanukkah story, which is a powerful one, full of heroism and drama. It begins with the death of Alexander the Great in 323 BC, when Judah and its capital Jerusalem were given to the Syrian Greeks to rule. This was not such a terrible thing for the Jewish people of the time, for they were generally permitted to maintain a discrete self-autonomy in most areas of life, so long as they paid their taxes and nominal respect to the foreign ruler. Yet, while there was no coercion, the process of assimilating Jews to Greek culture was beginning. There were many Jews who welcomed this. For the most part, they were the upper class, the landed gentry, the trendsetters. They were the Jewish aristocrats, and there were many of the priestly class among them. These Jews found both the Greek way of thinking and the Hellenic lifestyle appealing, and in many cases, this meant they abandoned the Jewish way of life and Jewish practices. These trendsetters were a sizable and significant number, but there were many Jews who resented and resisted the religious and cultural incursions of the Greeks. And as long as it was a matter of assimilation by choice, the devout and faithful Jews, as well as those who adopted only some Greek ways, quietly went their own way, the Jewish way. But under the rulership of King Antiochus IV, this began to change. The Greeks stepped up the policy of religious oppression against the semi-autonomous Jewish state. In the year 169 BCE, a Greek city was established opposite the Temple Mount in Jerusalem. And the Greeks instituted religious practices, including pig sacrifices and pagan cultic worship in the Holy Temple. This strategy, combined with the prohibition of Jewish religious practices, such as Torah study and keeping the Sabbath, were designed to weaken the very center of Jewish spirituality. The Jews, who were highly pro-Greek, went along, of course. The moderates who had adopted some Greek ways remained uneasy, but remained fairly quiet. But the masses of the Jewish people began to resist. But the king gave resistors only one choice: convert or die. Many were martyred for their faith. The only thing left for the remaining faithful was to escape or to fight. How could they fight? The active resistors were a small, scraggly, unarmed band of farmers, country poor, and uneducated people, the lowest and most vulnerable strata of society. But soon they were organized by an outlaw named Matthias of the Hasmonean family. Matthias was no common outlaw. However, he was a priest, well-educated, pious, family man, a person of status and respect from a small town not far from Jerusalem. History tells us that he had perhaps even been moderately pro-Greek. But in the year 167 BCE, pig sacrifices had been forcibly introduced into his town, and while many Jews went along with this, Matthias could not. He stabbed one Jew who did sacrifice a pig, killed the king's agent, and destroyed the sacrilegious altar. Then he ran for his life to the hills along with his 5 sons. Little by little, they were joined by other Jews who also wanted to remain faithful. Initially, all they wanted was to be able to escape religious and political oppression and live their lives by the Torah. But this was not to be. Matthias, who was an old man, died shortly after they fled. His son Judah, who came to be known as Judah Maccabee, of Judah the Hammer, took over and began planning and executing very successful guerrilla raids and attacks on their enemies. The Maccabees, as they became known, despite their small numbers, had many things on their side: familiarity with the terrain, a sympathetic local population, and a fight-to-death attitude. These helped carry them to victory after 3 years of bitter fighting against the great Greek armies. They recaptured the Temple Mount, cleaned and purified the temple, demolished the pig solidified altar, and rebuilt and rededicated a new one. In the original Hanukkah story, there is no miracle of light, no familiar story of the oil that was just enough for one day, but somehow lasted for 8. But today, this is perhaps the best known part of Hanukkah. So where did this miracle come from, and why was it necessary? After all, you think that the story of the Maccabees, that powerful story of the victory of a few over so many, of the rededication of the temple, would be a miracle enough for future generations. But unfortunately, the Maccabees' victory was fragile. Judah was killed in a battle only 5 years later. And the descendants of the Hasmoneans ended up fighting one another, and then over time began converts to Greek culture, some of them even persecuting their own people. It is perhaps because of this later history of the Hasmonean kings that the rabbis of later Talmudic times shifted the focus of the festival away from the military victory towards the miracle of lights. The legend quoted in the Talmud says that the Greeks had defiled all the oil stored for the sacred lamps in the temple, but that when the Hasmoneans, the Maccabees, reclaimed and rededicated it, they found one single jar of oil that still had the seal of the Jewish high priest on it. And even though there were only enough oil for one day, by a miracle it lasted for 8 days. And thereafter, those 8 days were appointed as festival days. This shift in focus also allowed the festival to take on a more spiritual significance and created a powerful new symbol, the Hanukkah Menorah. In our time, kindling the candles of the Hanukkah Menorah and celebrating this festival is carried out by a broader spectrum of Jews than any other holiday, except for the holy days of Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. Lighting the menorah is the major ritual associated with Hanukkah. The candles are kindled after sundown, one for each night as the festival proceeds until all 8 are lighted on the last day. The purpose of the ritual is to be known the miracle of Hanukkah. And originally the menorah was lighted outside near the doorstep so that all passerbys could see it. It's still customary to place the menorah in the window so it can be seen. The only problem with this, as any rabbi will tell you, is that Hanukkah was never intended to be a major Jewish holiday. The major holidays are all mandated by the Torah, while Hanukkah, as we just heard, was instituted by the rabbis. So why is Hanukkah so popular? The answer has to do with particularity and with history. In fact, Hanukkah is not mentioned in the Torah at all. It is in the Talmud, which the rabbis wrote, and it is in the books of Maccabee 1 and 2, which can be found in the Catholic Bible. Back at the turn of the century, millions of Eastern European Jews came to the United States, mostly settling in urban areas like New York. These newcomers, most of them, were happy to adopt American customs. And some of the customs revolved around Christmas. The secular Christmas, of course, the one with Santa Claus, decorated trees, and gift giving, not the one with the Messiah born to a virgin. How did Christmas become secularized? Well, first of all, it was created as a holiday by decree of the church authorities back in the days of the Romans. They ordained the celebration of Christ's birth to coincide with the Roman state holiday that occurred at the time of the winter solace. As a way to gently convert the Romans, and then as the church moved north into Europe, celebrating Christmas became the bridge to the peoples there, who adapted and adopted the festival according to their own local customs. Some of these people did not, like the English Puritans, our religious ancestors, who came to these shores and settled in Massachusetts. They actually made it illegal to celebrate Christmas, for they felt it distracted the people from the true worship of God. Violators were fined. It wasn't until after the Civil War and the arrival on our shores of German immigrants that Christmas became a major holiday event. And again, after the turn of the last century, as mass marketing and advertising rose up and began to take over and homogenize our culture, Christmas became that primary commercial secular gift-giving event the immigrant Jews adopted. But the second generation of American Jews felt differently. They challenged this embrace of a festival that, despite its secular trappings, was fundamentally Christian. Prominent religious leaders, more secure with maintaining a Jewish identity in America, urged schools to let Jews abstain from Yuletime celebrations or to provide all-purpose holiday parties instead. But Jewish parents couldn't very well deprive their kids of gifts or seasonal merriment at home. And given that the dates of Hanukkah usually fell near Christmas, gift-giving became the norm, and lighting the menorah providing a satisfying alternative to decorating a tree with ornaments and lights. 3 years before World War II, when the Zionist movement was growing in the hopes of establishing a Jewish state in Israel, that also raised Hanukkah's profile. The holiday's emphasis on self-reliance and military strength in the face of persecution dovetailed with Zionist themes. After the war, as Jews moved with other Americans out of central cities and into suburbia, the popular cultural meaning of Hanukkah morphed again. Its primary lesson, according to sociologist Marshall Clare, was no longer reverence to God for performing a miracle, but the triumph over religious intolerance, a perfect message for liberal America in the age of the civil rights movement. Thus, as Jews became more integrated in American life, Hanukkah embedded itself in American institutions like television, office parties, Hallmark stores, bookstores, and so on. Except among Orthodox Jews, it is a major festival. Clearly, among Jewish leaders, we find this is just more evidence of how Jews are losing their culture and being assimilated into both Christian society and secular culture. Others, however, find hope in the way Hanukkah has evolved. They see it as a creative, lively assertion of Jewish identity in our increasingly multicultural society. Indeed, this is how I see it, and it gives me hope. Understanding both the traditional historical story and the American evolution of the holiday gives me hope as well. With the lights of Hanukkah, the Jewish people reclaim and proclaim their right to practice their faith and their pride in their law and their traditions. Those lights shine out for religious freedom and for the joy of holding on to one's cultural and spiritual heritage. Here in the United States, where Christian culture looms so large, I imagine that celebrating Hanukkah is particularly refreshing and sustaining. As I said earlier, our unitarian-universalist way of religion is one that encourages us to learn about and understand the practices and traditions of other religious peoples. Not so that we might borrow traditions, but so that we might understand more deeply and respect more fully the perspective, spiritual yearnings, and culture of the people who live those traditions. And through that understanding and respect, we deepen our self-knowledge as well. When I think about Hanukkah, I think of the holiday traditions and practices that come from my family and how they remind me of who I am, of my history, and my roots. When I think of Hanukkah, I'm reminded that we Unitarian Universalists, like the Jewish people, are a religious minority. And although one of our nation's founding principles was religious freedom, we cannot help but be aware that there are forces which would dearly love to impose their religious beliefs and practices upon all of us. Hanukkah reminds us not to take our freedom for granted, and to defend it with all our strength and spirit, as we have to watch the Maccabees defend theirs. Hanukkah also reminds me that it is okay to be different from the dominant culture, to be proud of what makes me different, and to stand up for what I believe in. It also encourages me to turn my awareness of my differences into a sympathy and compassion for others whose differentness has been used against them. Hanukkah reminds me to be an ally with lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender persons, to work against racism, and ableism, and sexism, and ageism. Hanukkah reminds me that I have power I can use to fight oppression and help create a level playing field for all persons. In this season of darkness, of longing for and waiting for the light, let us hold fast to the spiritual significance of this time against the tide of commercialism that flows all around us. Let us remember, as we celebrate the universal themes of freedom, hope, miracles, and rebirth, how these themes relate to us particularly as Unitarian Universalists, and individually as persons, as well as seeking to understand their meaning for others. Amen. Please stand and